Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name's Eric, and welcome to Applied Day 2020. So we've been doing this for a few years now, and it's kind of our annual event that we do. And I guess obviously now it's kind of one of the few ways we can connect with the social distancing and everything. So, but we're hoping to provide a series of webinars throughout today and tomorrow, and maybe you already attended this morning's 9 a.m. webinar regarding automating engineering designs with iLogic. In this particular webcast, we're going to be talking about what's new in Vault 2021. So you've probably seen that, and I'm assuming if you're attending, you either are interested in Vault or are currently using Vault. And over the past month or so, the new versions have started to come out. So Inventor, Vault, AutoCAD Electrical. So you can see the schedule on my screen here, and over the next couple days, if you want to, like, one of the popular ones is obviously the what's new in Inventor. A lot of our customers are using that for their CAD design, digital prototyping, and then also Electrical 2021. We're doing one on that this year, but also some other kind of I feel like really valuable webcasts. One that I think is a great one is the FEA overview and best practices. We've got a great team that can provide your FEA services for your group. If that's something you've been outsourcing, or you just even want to learn more about it, if it's an area you need to grow in to kind of make sure your products are ready to go, and obviously you try to shrink down that prototyping time, all that kind of stuff. So attend that one at 1. Obviously there's a handful of other ones. Obviously coming up after mine here is the moving to containerized environment. One of our application developers is going to be doing that. And then also I think the 1 o'clock one today is going to be a good one too, with using some scientific methods for manufacturing analysis, trying to optimize your factories and whatnot. So this session will be recorded today. If you're not able, or if you have other colleagues that maybe didn't get a chance to attend this morning, so we can send you the link and distribute that so they can kind of also see what's new in Vault. So go ahead and get started here. So obviously if you're not familiar with Applied Engineering, we're an engineering and IT services company. We've also got a reprographics side of our business, and also then I guess the primary thing we're talking about in today's session is the Autodesk software. So we're an Autodesk partner reseller, but we provide training, support, implementation. We also do projects and stuff like that. So hopefully if you're an existing customer, I'm sure we've been in touch in the past, and if you're not, hopefully we can kind of get to know each other and provide some solutions for your team. And a big part of it, obviously, our services side, so IT and engineering services, design, manufacturing, software development, reprographics are some other parts of our business. All right, but the main thing we're going to be talking about here for the next 45 minutes or so is what's new in Vault 2021. And I think you'll be pretty, I don't know, I was impressed. Obviously each version, they try to give you something that can kind of help your team, and obviously through your customer requests and through just obviously there's enhancements, there's some potential fixes if there's issues. There's always new platforms out there, new operating systems. People are working in virtual environments now, so there's always challenges to try to make sure things work properly. So I think Autodesk does a great job of trying to meet those challenges and then go above and beyond and provide enhancements and things like that that can either save customers time or make their lives better. So yeah, with that, let's go ahead and take a look at I also want to mention, if there are any questions, I know you're in listen only mode right now, so if there's questions, obviously feel free to chat or to enter those in the webinar. You should see on the right side there's a place to enter questions. You can also enter in things in the chat window there. I guess those are the two spots you can kind of type in your questions, and I'll try to answer those at the end. Emily is on the line here too, and she'll be kind of going through those, and we'll try to recap and get those answered at the end. So we'll try to leave at least 5-10 minutes at the end of the session here to address any of those. Okay, so with Vault 21, Autodesk is trying to provide more value for subscribers. And I was thinking about this. I was kind of a little bit hesitant, you know, to go move towards the subscription side. And I think a lot of our customers were, but man, the more you think about it, the more it almost puts the more pressure, you know, on Autodesk to continue to deliver value to customers. If they're going to continue to subscribe to their product, they need to know that they're getting value back from that. So to me, it's almost a better situation for a customer that you can you know end your subscription anytime, obviously, and use a different solution. But Autodesk, you know, it's on them to really maintain your trust and continue to provide better software, really. And so I think they've done that here, especially with Vault in 2021. So a couple things we're going to talk about. The interoperability with Revit is that first kind of graphic there, productivity for CAD users. So there's a handful of things there. The middle one there is I think really the key thing here, smart duplicate reduction, and we'll get into that here coming up. But then also on the right side there is more efficiency for administrators. So a handful of things they've done to just make things quicker. If you're, you know, I'm assuming a lot of the people attending today's session are maybe the CAD administrator or the data management you know, person at your company. So you'll see some good things in there today that I think to help with that. All right, so first let's take a look at productivity for CAD users. All right, so in today's world, there's more you know, collaboration basically between all these different disciplines, really. You know, the construction side is working a lot more with the manufacturing side, you know, and buildings, you know, either architecture or the AEC versus, you know, product design. You know, they're really getting meshed together a lot more than I think in the past. So we need to be able to share information back and forth to be able to get products, get new designs, get new buildings created faster and more efficiently, and avoid any, you know, pitfalls there. So one of the key things, obviously, if you're familiar with some other Autodesk products, you know, I would say the majority of our customers are kind of more on the manufacturing side, where we're dealing with designing products. But we do have you know, several customers that work also kind of on that architecture side, the AEC. And so one of the biggest and best tools out there today is called Revit. And so that assists, you know, the architecture side in creating buildings, you know, to be able to get your bill of materials and make changes quickly. And so with that, a lot of the smaller, you know, maybe not smaller, but, you know, some of the other designs in there, whether it be railings or, you know, balconies or just, you know, other pieces that, you know, Inventor's good at. So as far as designing those types of parts to go in your building, that's where the kind of the collaboration and the kind of the connectivity needs to happen. So what Autodesk has done is with any CAD now, Inventor works a lot more powerfully with Revit. And then also with Vault, now it supports that interoperability. So when I check in an Inventor file that's been referencing a Revit file, it doesn't actually take the Revit file and put it into Vault, but it maintains that link. It builds the link into the Inventor file. So Vault, when you check it in, it knows the connections there. And then when you go back to maybe check it out again, make changes, it immediately updates that connection to the Revit files, whether they're stored on a network drive or in BIM 360. So that's kind of a key thing if you're in that kind of a crossover area, if your business kind of dabbles in both sides there, the architecture versus the product design, that's a nice link to be able to take advantage of. All right, unused document detection is another thing here that they've added in, and so they put in a couple things that over the past few years, just different properties that have kind of helped. So the one last year, I believe, was the has drawing. So if your part doesn't have a drawing, it's nice to be able to find that quickly. If you're releasing a design, I need to know which of my parts, which of my assemblies don't have a drawing yet. So that was something they had put in last year. So I believe it was either last year or the year before, but now they have another property that calls has parent relationship. So I was going to make a joke actually about, obviously with the the pandemic now, it's obviously harder to have relationships with your parents because of some are higher at risk. So that's my one little about that. Obviously, so Vault, when we're talking about parents, we're talking about the the relationship between components and the assemblies or sub-assemblies above, or drawing that's associated with that. So that's really what we're talking about here. So that makes it easier to realize, okay, if I've got several components in there, which ones are actually used in assemblies and which ones are just kind of maybe what they call them orphaned out there, where we can maybe get rid of those files. So that's a nice thing to, which, obviously over and above what you can get in a Windows environment. Obviously that's what Vault is all about, is giving you extra information, whether it be the properties in the file, but in this case, it's also, the connections between children and parents of a file. So that's just another nice, you can do kind of a quick search, maybe create a save search for that, and be able to identify what parts are, just kind of standalone out there and not really used in anything. All right, another advantage here, copy design has been a great tool within Vault for a long time. Hopefully if you are using Vault, you're taking advantage of that. I know some of our customers still try to use the save a copy, within Inventor, and it can work fine for certain things, but man, the copy design is so much easier to use, and you can actually do multiple assemblies if you're working in Vault Pro. So that's kind of an advantage. One thing they added here is the ability to kind of map a rule, create a rule within the copy design to take a property and map it to maybe a different property, and modify those. So basically what that comes down to, I guess one example that I use quite a bit is that maybe you get a set of files, from, either a designer or maybe a third party, and you're trying to, get those into your system, and maybe they use the property called title for the part title or the drawing title, and your company uses description. Obviously properties has been a battle, going back to, the very first designs, like what properties do we store? What are they called? What are they named? Is your ERP system call them the same thing? So it's always been kind of a challenge to make sure properties are seamlessly transferred throughout your company. So that's the data, that's the metadata that really can drive, your revisions, your materials and different things like that, whatever you put in your title block. So there's so many different properties that we want to store, in our model and reference in our drawings. But so the nice thing is now we can take those properties during a copy design, we can transfer or convert, title to description or vice versa, or any of those other, we can create a rules there to try to map those properties over in the copy design process. A couple other, kind of just maybe sort of minor things, but just, speeds up and gives you more productivity. Within Inventor now, we have an option to look at, to only see out-of-date files. So there's a checkbox for that. That'll, when you see the red arrows going around, that tells you that there's a newer version out in Vault. So you have to get that one. Obviously, if you're working in a multi-user environment where there's many designers making changes as you go throughout and collaborating, you need to make sure you're working on the latest and greatest. It doesn't, if you're working, obviously, if you're familiar with Vault, you work on files locally, right? So you download them from Vault, working on them there, and that's where we're going to be making changes. So if I'm going to be opening an assembly, I want to make sure that I've got all the latest and greatest locally. So that's just another way to kind of do that, identify if there are any out-of-date ones, then we just have to refresh that file and get the latest. There's also a couple things in the bottom there that you can see the window where they've consolidated the state changes into one versus having multiple pop-ups. Just kind of a time saver there. And then also in the job queue, we can now expand out beyond 1,000 items in the job queue. So you can set that to see how many you want to see in there. And obviously, if you're not familiar with the job queue, that's a Vault Professional add, I guess it kind of tags along with Vault Pro. It's called the job processor that gets installed on each client machine. And what that does is it creates DWF files, it creates PDF files, it does all the background work, as you're checking in files, whatever, update, synchronizes properties. And we'll also see in a little bit here that it helps with the duplicate file indexing. So that's what the job processor does. And it's just nice. Sometimes you need to go in and look at the queue and see how many jobs are currently in the queue. Maybe there's something that needs to be kind of re-entered or redone, or maybe there's an error that you have to kind of identify. So the looking at the job queue is handy. All right, some of our customers have been asking for also is the ability to customize the ECO template. So if you're using Vault Professional, this is just a professional tool that there's an engineering change order system built in. And throughout the process that we create routings, to different people to sign off on, changes that are happening and to certain drawings or certain files. So these automatic emails get sent around, and then that gives you links to be able to open up the drawing right from there. But you want to get the appropriate information on that particular email, so we can customize that now. In that bottom window, you can see that, if we want to put in, if you're using items or if you're using files, and we want to put in maybe the ECO number, in addition to the ECO state that it's in. So all those things are just different properties that we can sort of put in the in the automated email and configure that a little bit better. Used to be just kind of a what you see is what you get, and it was kind of a pretty text based, and so now you can kind of actually bring in properties a little bit easier and multiple kinds. All right, so if you're using Navisworks, they've added the ability now to see the DWF. Before, Navisworks files could be stored in Vault, but they didn't have a DWF file. So that if Navisworks has a couple different file types, I believe it's NWF, NWS, something like that. But Navisworks is a viewer for kind of large scale, either architectural buildings or even if it's from Inventor, large designs. You can do fly-throughs, you can do interference detection, stuff like that. There's a lot of cool markups. So Navisworks is it's a quick viewer for these large scale designs. So that's it comes with the product design collection. So check it out if you haven't seen that. But now Vault just works a little bit better with it now. We can also create shared views. So that's something they added a couple versions ago, the ability to kind of kick out shared views out into the cloud, so that you can collaborate with other people, let them see that view and not have to allow them access into your Vault or into the thin client. You can create a shared view right from Vault and kick that up to the cloud. All right, so now it's kind of the main event in my mind, the smart file duplicate or smart duplicate reduction. Now, if you're like most companies, it's difficult. You got lots of people working, and you might have 10 different parts out there called plate, 20 different parts called bracket. If you're not constantly monitoring that and updating the file names, and obviously we're not even just talking about parts with the same name. Vault has always had the ability to kind of check for duplicate file names, but now we're actually talking about geometry. So it's kind of I don't know, in my mind, it's a pretty big deal. And there used to be third-party tools for this, like, to try to check for geometry in your network, if it's got the same, and they would use different things like using the, how many kilobytes are in the file to see if it's the same thing and things like that. But the way Inventor and Vault work now, and this is just primarily an Inventor tool, it's dealing with the part files and assembly files, but we're looking, is there the same exact part out there, regardless of what the name of it is? We want to know if the geometry is identical to something we've already got. And most of the time, if the file name is the same, most likely it's probably the same geometry too. So this will help, identify those, but also, check if there's something else that's already been designed. We can just quickly swap it out and not have the same part in different folders or different names. And so if you think about the annual cost, there was a study done by, I think it was, what's it called, a third party out there, Aberdeen Group, found that between every part number costs around $4,500 to $23,000 per part number. So if you think about that, obviously if you can reduce this by 10%, 20%, it's a huge cost savings. So I know I worked with the company here, it's been about 17 years now, but they actually went through the time to create a system to identify, okay, these are like hydraulic hoses, for instance. The company I was working for had tons of hydraulic hoses in their system, and they didn't want 10 different part numbers with the same exact hose. So they created a system to check for the exact length, exact fittings on the end of the hose. And so they put a lot of time and effort into building that library of parts so that they can easily, quick, and go check for a part. But it was a manual process even at that. I had to go search to see, is there a hose 50 inches long? with the right ends on the, the right fittings. So now what we're talking about is the system will do that itself. If I go into Inventor, we can actually check for a specific file and go see if there's anything out there like it. And it doesn't matter. It's not based on features either. It's actually based on just the geometry. So you can create, as you probably know, within Inventor, you can create parts a lot of different ways. So this will actually, it doesn't matter the way you create it, it just matters what the end result is. If it has the same end geometry, that it'll find it out there. All right, so we're looking at reducing the amount of duplicate files out there. So that's kind of and there's some nice analysis tools built in here. I'm probably going to be talking too long on this here. I want to make sure we get through everything, and at least show you a little bit of this too. So if I speed up here, I apologize. But so yeah, we want to reduce the amount of kind of wasted space out there. And actually over time, we've seen some of our customers get to where you've got, hundreds of gigabytes and getting close to terabytes of information. And obviously space is getting cheaper and cheaper, but to be able to still do a backup, do a transfer to another server, or things like that, it gets to be so much time because there's so much, so much stuff and so much waste in the vault. So we want to try to reduce that, and obviously reduce the amount of part numbers and save money and save time, over the course of, kind of sifting through all this when you're designing. So this shows some good analytics. If you use there's a dashboard now within Vault for duplicates that we can check. And this, again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but this is just a Vault Professional tool. This does not come with Vault Basic or Vault Workgroup. So I guess in my mind, that's the amount of the ability that you've got here to save money and time, I think is reason enough to go to that Vault Professional. But again, if you want to learn more about this, let me know. We can always do kind of more of a one-on-one to see if it makes sense for your company. All right, let's take a look at the efficiency that they've added here for administrators. All right, so this is kind of the last section, and then we're actually going to get into, the live system here, and so you can see a little bit of, or a few of these things anyway, in the live environment. All right, so shows a couple of things they've done on the side over here as far as, updating, the system, making it easier for administrators, a little more granular in some cases as far as the, the ability to turn on and off certain things. So here's what the 2020 security model looks like. You can see obviously on the left side there, you got, if you're a team 1, team 2, and then obviously the shop, we typically on the shop workers, they need to be able to take the current data that's released and build it, right? So we don't necessarily want them to see everything that's currently at work in progress. So with Vault Pro, there's the lifecycle states and revisions that we, help control what we show them and what we don't show. However, even if we let them see it, there's times we we don't want them to download it, and that's really the main difference here. Is the ability to split those two things up. In 2020, if you could see it, you could get it, you could download that file. But now we can restrict that even a little bit further and say, well, the shop, we want them to be able to see, everything, but we only want them to download maybe the parts that are required for CNC, operations and things like that. Maybe they need to download a sheet metal part to be able to, kick it out to the, the nesting or something like that. So anyway, there's certain folders there that we might want to allow them to download, but also allow read access to pretty much all the production drawings. So that's the ability they have it now is to split those two things up. Read access and download access are now two different things. So I guess as far as the value there, obviously just the flexibility to kind of change that. And you'll see that when you go in to look at access. Before it was basically, read, modify, and delete access. Now you'll just see that read, download, modify, and delete will be one extra column, when you're assigning access. And this can be controlled in a few different ways, whether it be in the life cycle states, we can control it there, who can move, things, and just in the folder area. So we can set that up in a few different spots, that particular access. Let's see. So yeah, read, download. They're shown there. So it can be applied to roles, objects, and lifecycle states. DWF and PDF files continue to have a different ACL than CAD files. So As far as that goes, we can maybe allow them to download PDFs, but maybe not the actual CAD file. So that's also kind of a nice ability there. So also then kind of with that, they've added an audit log to track downloads and deletions. So if you notice this is in the, for administrators setting up these on the server side, there's a download file and then a deleted file. So we might want to know if anything's been deleted, it'll just kind of record that, or if certain things have been downloaded, be able to go back and look at that. So this is on the server side. On that far right graphic, you'll see this is what the ADMS looks like, the Autodesk Data Management Server Console. So on the left side, you'll see the audit log dialog box there, or the option there to go look at the audit logs. We've always had kind of the console log, the server log, the file store log. So those are all valuable if, as far as, if there is an issue, an error, we can kind of go back and help figure out what happened. But the audit log now for downloads and deletions is new. Just a kind of a minor thing, but obviously if you're managing users and your dialog box is scrunched, you can't maybe see their whole names. You got to hover over it or click on it to be able to see which one it is. So they've just allowed the ability to expand that dialog box when you're looking at security for either in a folder or other areas. So it helped just a little bit of a assistance with that. Now this one's kind of my claim to fame. I put this in, and so this just is good. It's a good reminder that the idea exchange does work, basically. So I've put a handful of them, well, more than a handful I go over the years in Inventor and in Vault on ideas. Just hey, and Autodesk looks at those, and I would encourage you to go out if you have an idea that something's not working like you think you want it to, or think it could be working better. Go out there and enter it in the idea exchange. I guess before you enter it in, make sure you do a search for it. Somebody else, probably 6 times out of 10 has already probably put in that idea. And so all you have to do is vote it up. And the more votes those ideas get, the more Autodesk is going to kind of, get that reminder and they track those all the time. So this is one of those ideas that actually got put into Vault 2021 now. You got to be a little patient. I think I put this one in there about 5 years ago. And it's a minor thing, but our customer was like, hey, if users leave the company, I don't want to sit there and keep seeing them, in this list. It gets to be large, and you have to try to sift through it all. So we just basically have a little checkbox in there now to just turn off the disabled users that have left the company. So that's just it's a minor thing, but obviously, those kind of things can be helpful over time. So again, make sure you go out to that idea exchange and take advantage of that. Autodesk is listening, and they take these things seriously, and eventually you might see your idea get put in. Let's see, usability enhancements here. So, this is kind of cool. So when you log into Vault as an admin, it shows a different color on the bottom. I find that, whenever I set Vault up for different customers, I normally have, especially most CAD administrators, or Vault administrators, they're also probably designing, or they also have other responsibilities. So when they're normally working in Vault, typically we want to have them as a regular designer, not necessarily have all the admin rights. So typically, I'll create a separate account for them to use when they're doing admin type stuff. Like somebody calls them up and say, hey, I accidentally released this part. Can you roll it back to the work in progress state? So those are things that you don't want to just necessarily do with any account. So we only allow admins to do that. So when you're in there as an admin, it kind of gives you a different color code there on the bottom. Lets you know that that's you're currently working in. All right, let's see, this is showing, like I mentioned earlier, our databases, our file stores are getting super large. Obviously over time, you're only creating new files. You're not typically deleting files, but there are options in there to help with that. So purging is probably, I would say on an annual basis, it's not a bad idea to go in and purge, especially if your Vault's getting up there in that, several hundred gigs. The backups take longer, all that kind of thing. So purging is a good, process to do periodically. And they've added something to help. If you turn on certain lifecycle states, this will actually allow it to go back and look for older, historical versions and allow to purge those as well. What purging means is basically, let's say you check in a file, 25 times over the course of its life. Over 5 years, maybe the initial design, you checked it in 5 times, you released it. And then you made a change to Rev B, and then you checked that in 5 times and released it. So there's all these interim versions in there that it's a whole file. Those aren't just like incremental changes to a part. They're actually they're whole files in there. So then you've got 25 files in there for the same part number. And so if you take that times the million files that you have, it really can explode pretty fast. So purging allows you to take out some of those interim, like maybe the work in progress files throughout the design that you're never going to go back to. You might want to keep always like Rev A, Rev B, Rev C, those release versions, but the other ones maybe you really don't need. So that allows you to go back and purge. There's also an option in there now too to do a quick validation. So they've improved that process a little bit. A lot of times when you do a backup right from Vault, the validation process takes, for a large database, it might take an hour or something like that. So it's got to go through that validation before it can actually start moving files into a backup. So always good to kind of, speed those things up. All right. Also with deployments, used to be where the Autodesk instance had to be named Autodesk Vault. Well, you might have some different rules at your company. I guess I haven't seen this a whole lot where it comes into play, but if your Vault is named something different, now they allow you to call the actual SQL instance something else than Autodesk Vault. So I'm sure for some companies this is cool and this is what they've asked for. I think most of our customers, they're probably fine with what it was currently named, but this allows a little more flexibility there. All right, so that kind of sums up, we've talked about some of the changes there for the administrators, increased cross-department and external collaboration while protecting data and eliminating extra work, reorganizing data to fit security systems, separate audit logs, reduce file store size, and comply in IT naming, converting, for maintenance costs and for test environment there. So that's that, the Autodesk Vault name. Okay. So again, more value for subscribers. I think that they've really done a nice job this year. You might not see, every single version have as much impact as Vault 2021 does in my mind, but I think this one's a huge one, especially with the duplicate reduction and I guess the Revit interoperability, if that's part of your business, and obviously some of the nice things they've done for the administrators. So they're constantly working on these things, and some of these might come out in just updates too throughout the year. Keep an eye out for those. Obviously, if you're using the Autodesk desktop app, those little updates, have a little plus sign there. It tells you, so they're putting enhancements and fixes out there, throughout the year. Probably it's almost, I would say, whether it's monthly or quarterly, for one software, that's about the amount of time that passes before there's another update out there. So keep those in mind. But obviously, I think for this 2021 version, I would certainly encourage you to consider upgrading just for take advantage of some of these things. All right, so I'm going to jump in. I guess if there are any questions right now, I can try to answer them, but I would like to show something in the live version. So let's take a look at a couple of the questions first. Looks like, does the job processor still consume a Vault license? No, it doesn't actually. I think that changed either in 2019 or 2020, where there's an inventor. The main thing is the inventor license too there. So we want that to be able to work without consuming a license. So the inventors, because it uses inventor kind of in the background too. So there's a read-only version of inventor that can get used for that. So no, it should not use a license to do those tasks now in the background. And I believe that was the only one there right now. So, all right, let's take a look then in the live system, and I'll bring up Vault, and I'm just gonna, so a couple of the key things that I want to touch on. Obviously, the one in my mind is the biggie is the duplicate file search. So let's open up. I think the nice thing about this is we can just look. I'll keep it kind of simple here. I'm gonna open up an assembly, and you can do the search on the entire assembly. So this is a fairly simple part, but maybe I'm creating one that's a little bit larger, a little bit bigger, and can I or maybe I'm making some changes to this and I want to know if there's anything out there that I can swap these out with. So basically, if I've got the part open, you got to be logged into Vault. I'm going to go over here to the Vault tab up on top, and on the far right here, they've added this Find Duplicates. Okay, so if I click on that, it opens up another little dialog slide out window over on the right side, and I can just pick the entire assembly here. So on the left side, I selected the cylindrical reaction beam is my assembly name. So now you can see that's been added in there. Now I just go down to, I want to look at check content center parts. So if I had bolts and nuts in here and stuff, maybe hopefully you're using the content center. That's a great tool to be able to not have to design those things, and you can even customize those, create a custom content center for your company if you want different properties, or maybe your hardware is just a little bit different or whatever. But let's go ahead and check in there too, and then also check release parts. We just go search, and it identified one part here. So if I hover over that, notice it shows that there is already another part out there called square tube 120. So that's the one I'm actually looking at. So it shows this is the one that found a duplicate. So if I click on that, it searches the Vault, and it found that there's another part number. So this looks like it's got a generated part number here, 10005, and this is currently got the same geometry. So if you go over to the right, you can see here that we can open that file, go to the Vault folder, show details on it. We can place it right in here, or do a replace all if there's several of these current parts built. So this doesn't necessarily tell you, like, I still have to create the part first, in Inventor before I can do a search for it. So it's still not a bad idea if you've got a similar, a lot of these similar types of, in this case, it's like a tube, square tube out there. Well, I probably want to use that either from the content center, or maybe if I've got something already out, similar design, go grab it before you design it. But this at least gives you an option. If once I create the part geometry, in Inventor, like, okay, I better just double check, because I feel like I used something like this out there before. And if I did find it, you can go and open it up here. So I want to show a couple other things with this. So I went and opened this part. So this is in Vault. It's got a specific number here, but I want to show, I did mention earlier, but the extrusion, this one was created using just a sketch. You can see the sketch is in the center here, 120 by 120. Looks like, and they got the radius on the corner there, and a certain thickness for this particular tube. But we actually can, design this completely differently. It doesn't, like I said, it's not based on the sketch or anything like that when this gets indexed. It's actually just on the geometry itself, which I think is a pretty valuable thing too. If it is the exact part, like, let me show a couple other things here first. Let's go open up. So I'm going to open up this other part. This isn't based on material at all either. So it could have, right now it's set to generic. Let's go ahead and change my material. It's going to probably well, I guess I don't have this one checked in yet. Let's change it to steel carbon. So obviously that isn't necessarily, it's not going to care what material it is. So that's something going to be up to you. If you're going to replace a part, make sure it's the same material, obviously. But now if I go, say, grab, let's go back. If I close that out here, let me go back to Vault and do a find duplicates and do a search on this one. This one actually found two out there, and the one square tube that I had in that assembly is out there, plus the other one, 1005. You can see this one's is a new part. It isn't in Vault yet. You can see the plus sign there, but this one was created completely differently. So we got this one was created using just a square tube. If I look at the sketch here, you can see, and it's actually not, in the other parts, it was actually extruded bidirectional versus this one's in one direction. So there we got 120 by 120 just square, but then they created the fillet on the outside here, and then just did a shell on it. So obviously probably a pretty weird way to create, to create a tube like this. In fact, the best way to create tubes would be to use the content center, or maybe iFeatures, things like that, where the shape is already, there, and you just give it a depth or whatever. But instead of trying to sketch all these out yourself, especially if they're standard parts, kind of like this. Frame generator is another good one, where these specific shapes, if you're creating a frame with tubes or I-beams or C-channel or whatever it is, use the frame generator, and all you got to do then is create a sketch or use the edges of an existing, part, and it'll generate the tube in there for you. But I just wanted to show, I thought that was kind of a interesting thing here, where the geometry can be created completely differently, but it'll still recognize that that's the same, and it's got to be the exact same length. If I change this length here a little bit, so it's not going to think it's the same part at that point. Let's go ahead and feature on this. Oh, that's not the extrusion. 500. Okay, there we go. Let's change that to 550 and save that. And now if I go back and I think I've got to refresh this search here and do a search there. This is what happens if it doesn't find anything. It said, good, we haven't found any duplicates. So I just increased the length there by 50 millimeters, and now it doesn't have anything that's similar to that. So it's got to be exact. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind that do not, if you're using solid bodies, it does have to be one body or the same amount of bodies, I guess, because if, sometimes with solid bodies, if you're using that for your modeling technique, you might have multiple bodies in the same part file. And so it's not, if there's two bodies versus one body, it's not going to think those are duplicates, just so you know. And then also if there's been tolerances applied where you've got a plus or minus, a certain tolerance there on the part itself, those would not be identified as duplicates either. So it's purely looking at the geometry here, and it's got to be exact. Okay. Let's see. So back, I did want to show that too out here. I'm in Vault now. I know we just got to want to make sure I'm done here before 9:50. So we got another 7 minutes. So I'll show just a couple more things. When you log in, first I'm logging as administrator, and look at the bottom I have mine listed as a green bar. So this tells me that I'm in as an admin. I'm just kind of in a regular part environment here where I got a part open, but up on the upper left, in your kind of the navigation window, you can see now there's a duplicate dashboard. So if I click on that, the setup for this is pretty straightforward. If I go to Tools, Administration, Vault Settings, here's the duplicate search settings. So basically, if you don't want the entire vault to be indexed, you can control it just by putting in certain folders. Excuse me. So I put in the entire vault. Basically, well, designs, I don't have it looking in Content Center files yet. I don't have it looking in libraries. I could add those, and I probably should, but I just kind of selected designs, and it's going to grab every subfolder underneath that. Now, the particular, once you have that configured, your parts do need to be indexed. So that's going to send all those, when you do that, it's going to send them to the job processor in order to index those. That's another process that in the background that the job processor takes care of. So that that's happening kind of behind the scenes. But here now I've got 77 of these 92 parts have been indexed. So I maybe had a couple new ones there that I didn't. There's 95 total parts in the vault. So you can see right now I've got a 67.4% duplicate ratio, which is obviously very high. And the reason for that is I had these, my training files here, the clamp, all these, I'd kind of loaded in again. I believe I put those underneath. Where did I put those here? So they're all in there twice. Oh, Project 2020. So that's kind of the reason I have the same clamp folder here. And one of the things I wanted to point out, there is an indicator if the part file originated from the exact same part. Basically, if they're identical, that's another indicator that you see within Inventor. Like if I open up, let's open up the grip here. I think that's one that, and if I do a search on, so we'll select that, the grip part, hit search. So the indicator is kind of at the bottom right of that one. So it did find one out there. There's another grip. You can see the color's different. It doesn't care about that. It's looking at geometry. But down on the bottom right, it says indicates that parts that share the same source. So this was most likely like a save a copy then, where my other one didn't have that indicator there because it was created as a completely separate tube and created in different ways. So if it's a save a copy or a copy design within Vault, it's going to show those have the same source, and it's all kind of based on, obviously the internal, information in that file that lets it know that this was the same source. So I didn't want to point that out. But back in that duplicate dashboard, another way, so if I'm going to try to tackle all these things, obviously within Inventor, you're nipping it in the bud up front. Like if I check that before I check it into Vault, it's not even an issue in Vault then, because I already maybe changed it or swapped it out on my Inventor assembly before I checked it in. I got the right file. But let's say you're trying to tackle it now, and so we get this couple indicators here that we can kind of track that percentage, watch it go down. But then up in the upper right, there's a view duplicate report. So if I click on that, it's generating it here on my other screen. But now I've got every single group that we can kind of go through all these. And eventually what you would maybe do, and I know this is a very tedious process to try to tackle your duplicates and try to, get down to using, having a master part, all that kind of stuff. But so here it's showing that there's a housing IPT that you can see the path. They're stored in different directories, but then there's also a large housing, but these are duplicates based on the geometry. Okay, so I can go through and figure out which one of these is my master, and then figure out if there's any usage. So that's the other, that has parent is going to be a nice addition there too, to kind of help with this. If it doesn't have a parent, I can probably just get rid of it. But if it does, then maybe I need to replace it with the master part, something like that. So this gives me a nice, way to kind of scroll through these and see, obviously there's a lot of exact copies here, grip with the same name. So there's always been a duplicate file name, but these actually show they have the same geometry too, which I guess makes sense. All right, so we've got that. And like I mentioned, the has parent, if I go in here and say, take a look at this grip, there's another property that we can look at with that. So maybe I'll just do a find on that. So let's do a find on everything. If one of those particular parts there, it was a file name. Let's go basic here and maybe just say, I think it was called housing. So we got large housing, and then another housing IPT, different, so we can maybe do a save search for this or something, but I'm just going to expand this out here. We see the path, but if I want to see which one of these actually has parents and what are the parents, we can add that other property in here. So if I go customize view, let's go to the fields here, and that should be in, scroll down. So remember I talked about the has drawing, that's a nice one. I'll put that one in there too, has drawing, and then has parent relationship, put those in, hit OK. And you can see it's just an indicator there. So it's the drawing, you can see none of these have drawings currently, but all three of them have parents. So if I want to see, okay, which one of these is the master? Well, I probably got to do a little more investigation to see, maybe look at the path. Okay, if I know the rotary view here, then I got this project, maybe this is more of a, I'm doing some conceptual stuff. So maybe I can get rid of that folder altogether. But obviously if I go to the folder here for that, it jumps to it behind. And now I can also, I could add that in here too to see which one of these have. If I go to the fields, let's put both those in there again. We got has drawing, has parent, hit OK. Actually, I probably want to move those up a little bit. We can move those up. Put them right by the revision. Hit close there, and now we can see all these drawings. This one does have a drawing, the rotary view or rotary V. You can see that has the indicator in there that it was a drawing. The actual drawing shows that it doesn't have a parent, but the rest of these do. So anyway, it gives you a nice indicator. Again, I think this is something where you'd probably create like a save search, put it in your search folder. If you do that save search, and then you can kind of go through and maybe just sift through some of those parts that aren't really used anywhere and figure out, do I really need those in Vault if they're not being used anywhere? All right. Let's see. So we looked at the has parent. Okay, let's look at just a couple things here, maybe just down to another minute or two, but I wanted to show the copy design function and how you can, so if I'm going to take maybe this handle assembly, let's right click, do a copy design on that. And here's my window. So if we go into the action, let's see, options, action rules, let's go define. And dragging that over here too. Let's go a new rule. Just putting it on my other screen. And down at the bottom here is where I kind of wanted to show that. Let's say this is we're creating, you know, maybe this is title to description. So basically during the copy design process, I want to map that rule. So we'll say anything with, you know, I don't know, we could do file extension, I guess is a pretty common one, contains, you know, IPT, add that, and then maybe IAM, add that. So if it contains any of those while we're copying, we want the property, what I say, title. So we want description copy from. So description is going to be copied from the value of the title. We just add that in there, and so that's what it's going to do. It's any of those parts that come in, it's going to look for property, you know, the text and the title, and it's going to copy that over to description. So that can be something, you know, helpful, I guess, if you're trying to standardize, and that's something we, you know, encourage all our customers to try to do is, you know, even document those things, like what is our process, you know, what's our workflow, and try to standardize those things, put them in a, you know, create a document that kind of lists how we do things, so that, you know, new people come in and there's always something you kind of rely back on. You know, there's going to be turnover here and there, and we want to make sure that we don't, you know, get, I guess, go down the wrong path basically with somebody new. So anyway, so that's the process there of creating that, and you know, basically then we can add other files here. Eventually we'd maybe do you know, change these names to something else. I guess if you use the copy design, let's just go copy all those, and it just adds. My default is here to just add a copy in the front of it, but obviously you can use part numbering schemes, you know, things like that, and eventually we execute copy. And we can copy to different, you know, different folders and whatnot. There's a lot of functionality here, and if you're using Vault Basic, this probably looks a little bit different to you, just because there are so many extra tools that they put in on the professional side with copy design. All right, and they should have went. I believe they're just in this folder. There we go. There's my copy of the handle assembly, and then the 3 copied parts underneath it. Let's see, a couple. Yeah, I guess we talked about, you know, some of the, I guess in my mind, the key things. I know we're down to probably the end of it here. Some of the other administrative stuff, feel free if you want to learn more about that, or you know, feel free to set up kind of or you reach out to me and we can kind of set up a one-on-one if you'd like. Let's see, are there any other questions here? Let's take a look at that before we call it good. Let's see, is a full reindex required to populate the has drawing or has parent relationship properties? I don't believe so on that. For the duplicates though, it does require indexing the duplicate files in there. So anything that's currently in there, it's not going to automatically do that for you. We'd want to make sure those get put into the duplicate search. But as far as the has drawing and the has parent, I believe that property should show up on any existing data. For some reason, let's see. Any other questions? Boy, the screen is really. Anyway, trying to get through these. Is there a tolerance on this, or is exact duplicate geometry only? It's exact duplicate geometry only. So what I meant by tolerance is it's something that can be built in to the file, and that I believe there's with the tolerance analysis and stuff that'll actually not look at it as duplicates if you put that in there. So it's looking at, it's not, you know, plus or minus a certain amount, it's exact geometry. And I don't believe there's a way to change that, but that would be kind of something I think, you know, potentially for hoses, even like if it's plus or minus 1 inch on the hose could be nice. But let's see, duplicate dashboard reports columns customizable. That's a good question. I don't believe those are. But let me check into that one. I'll try to find that out. So I apologize, but I know we've got another session starting here at 11. So if these questions, I'll make sure to get back to the people that asked them, and Thank you for attending today and good luck. Let me just go back quickly here to the rest of the schedule for the rest of the week here, or today and tomorrow. So again, make your voice heard, go to the ideas page. Thank you for attending today. We've got some upcoming webinars in the future and also lots of training on the schedule. So please check that out. And then as far as the rest of the training or the rest of the applied day, stay tuned for the containerized environment, manufacturing analysis, and then tomorrow, a good slate of events over there. So thanks and have a great day.